This week on Focus on Photography, oh my goodness, we have some outstanding guests in here that's going to talk about being down in the pit with your camera. And we're talking about concert photography. Stay tuned. Focus on Photography is brought to you from LastPass Studios. You're focused on security, but are your employees? LastPass can ensure that they are by making access and authentication seamless. Visit lastpass.com/twit to learn more.
Podcasts you love.
From people you trust.
This is Twit.
This is Focus on Photography, episode 11, recorded Thursday, January 16th, 2020. Position in the pit. Hey, what's going on, everybody? This is Focus on Photography here on twit.tv, coming to you live this fine Thursday morning here at LastPass Studios. Boy, it sounds like I'm at the beach because there's so much water just swooshing around outside with this crazy rainstorm. So, I hope we can stay safe in here, my man.
I think so.
I'm sitting here with my man, Mr. Michael Woolsey, and we got some amazing guests. We're going to get to them in a second. Wools, how you be, my man?
I'm good. So stoked about 2020.
2020. We've been getting a nice, strong start here, and you've been busy. I've been busy. We've been cranking out content. We've been sharing a lot of different stories, and it's just been a lot of fun. And like you said, a pretty momentous start.
Yeah, I really do feel that.
Totally digging it. But we have some guests for the people watching on the live stream. You see the little monitor behind us. We have not one, but two guests joining us this time. And I'm not going to call them peas in the pod, but they do have some pretty similar backgrounds. First up, we have Mr. Alan Hess Photography, joining us for the first go round. How you doing, Mr. Hess?
I'm good. It's good to be here.
Appreciate you hopping in and spending some time with us here on Focus on Photography, and looking forward to picking your brain a little bit on some of the things that you've been working on and been doing over the years, because it's not just photography. It's been some books. It's been a little bit of everything with your camera.
A lot of books.
A few.
And also we have a repeat and return of the awesome Steve Brazill.
Good morning, everyone.
Good morning.
How you doing, my man?
I'm doing really, really good. Alan is a friend of mine. Alan's been on my show before, so this is
sweet.
This is just awesome.
See, I just set up a little reunion. Is that what you did?
I think you did.
Oh,
yes, and a nice one too.
This is me patting myself on the back. Nice job, Ant. For the folks that are joining us for the first time here on Focus on Photography, let me tell you a little bit about this show. We like to sit down around these mics and just have a conversation. We'll talk about the current news and rumors in the world of photography and video. We don't get too deep into it. Just depends on what it is. And then we get into whatever our guest is working on and bring them into the conversation, because we like to pick their brains a little bit, allow them to talk about what they've been working on. And hopefully that information is going to go down in your ear holes and help inspire you and help give you a little bit of insight on what you can do for your photography and videography and creative endeavors. Just get out there and start shooting and creating some amazing content. And again, it's just a nice little fun chat. We don't do interviews on here because I'm not CNN and anything like that. Wolves is not Good Morning America. We're just going to have some general fun conversations around a nice cup of coffee and just do what we do. Does that sound good to everybody?
Sounds good to me.
All right.
Sounds good.
Cool. So let's go ahead and get into our little rundown and notes. Last week, we recorded a different bit of a schedule because of travel to CES. And I'd be remiss if I didn't mention CES, which is the Consumer Electronics Show. I'm back in town. My voice sounds a little bit weird today. I don't know why. I'm not going to blame CES, but it does sound like a good excuse. So let's just go with that. We'll do a little bit of a wrap up. The things that caught my eye at CES, some of the big headlines was Canon's, first off, launching the new 1DX Mark III. We alluded to that. I was able to get my hands on it and play with it for a few minutes. I don't know if they're going to send one to the studio to play with.
Can I play with it?
The camera is an absolute tank, like the previous iteration of it. And pretty expensive, about $6,500. So it is the Pros camera. You get the new card format. Is it C Express? I always get it confused.
CF Express.
CF Express cards instead of the compact flash. So those cost a little bit more, but you're getting a lot better performance, which makes perfect sense when you're out there shooting sports and shooting, bald eagles flying by, snatching up salmon out of the rivers. It makes perfect sense for that kind of work. Street photographer, I don't know why you would need that much horsepower, but sure, have at it, folks.
Yeah.
Try being covert with a 1DX.
Right.
Yeah, you can't really do a very good job with that.
It felt great, and I love the extra joystick on the back of it where it allows you to move your focus points with your thumb pretty easily. It sort of reminded me of the mirrorless cameras where you can put your thumb on the LCD and just sort of move your thumb around while you're looking through your viewfinder to lock focus, and it sort of helps you be a little bit more consistent on that. And again, it's a big price point of $6,500, and it's worth noting. Right. What are y'all thoughts on that?
I actually have a question for you since you played with it, because I'm wondering.
Sure.
The joystick on the back, which really isn't a joystick, it's a sensitive,
it's like a button
to your fingers touch to move the focus points.
Right.
The guys from DP Review, I think it was Chris, said that he had issues with it because he would just go to do the AF button.
Oh.
And it would move the focus point. Did you have that problem?
It's the way they have it lined up. I could see why that happens. I have big fingers, so I did have to sort of stop and think about it a time or two, because what they did is they had it set up in front of their stage, and they had some models walking out and doing their thing on the stage. So you're trying to grab that eyeball of the model for your shot. So yeah, you did need to have to just think twice for just half a second. But once I figured out, I need to keep my thumb here, I was good.
Okay. Yeah, that was an interesting. I'm a Canon shooter. I think, Alan, you're a Nikon, right?
Yeah, he's been shooting Nikon, I believe, right?
Yeah, I'm a Nikon shooter, so I look at the specs to come out and I go, cool, there's another, top end camera, which is great because it means that they're still developing stuff, and it keeps everyone honest and it keeps competition going. And
competition, baby, competition.
And really, to me, that's where it is you want these guys pushing each other down the road. But as a Canon shooter, I shoot a 5D4 because when I picked up the 1DX Mark II, it's a beast.
Yeah.
I was like,
tank, man.
Oh my gosh. And I didn't want two of those on my hip, so I shoot the 5D4. But I got to be honest, this body, as heavy as it would be, this is interesting to me. I do use rear button focus.
Okay.
The ISO performance, according to David Bergman on this thing, he posted a shot that's 12,800 ISO, and it's crystal clean.
Wow. Okay.
This body's intriguing to me, except for the $6,500.
Yeah. And plus, but what about the 20 pixels? It's
20 megapixels.
Yeah,
I think that's
bother
fine. I think that's fine.
What you're doing
for sports guys, that's
perfect, right?
That's fine. There's nothing, you don't need more than that. The Nikon Pro line into the D numbers, I've shot a D3 and a D4 and a D5 and those numbers, and they weren't massive megapixel cameras because that's not what their job is. Their job is to capture 10, 15 frames, fast, get that quarterback being sacked in that split second, The nice part about I don't shoot the pro level. I mean, my last one was a D4. I still have it. It's sitting behind me. I don't use it very often. I'm now shooting a D850 and a D750.
750. I've seen a lot of that.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, dude, the 750 was probably, everyone, little history. Nikon came out with a D3, and then really soon after that, they came out with a D700, which was the same sensor in a camera that cost like $2,000 less, and everyone lost their minds. So when they came out with the 750, and it kind of like was for that 700 shooter, it's massive. I mean, people just loved that camera. It did really, really well. I picked it up. I was like, oh my God, this thing is fantastic for what it is. But it comes from, you got to have them develop the top end cameras so that technology kind of comes down to the cameras right below it and trickles down a little bit. It's the only time that trickle down theory works in anything seems to be in technology, is that they invent the stuff on the top end cameras and then it becomes cheaper, it becomes easier to use, and it comes down into that prosumer level and then the consumer level. And so that's why I'm always excited when I see one of these top end cameras come out, because I know that ISO performance. I know that focusing performance. I know that image quality is going to slowly start to come down into the other cameras, because once they have it, they're going to just shove it into everything.
Yep. Might as well.
Plus,
right?
on the megapixel side, Alan, you've got pictures at the arena that are printed full wall height. What was the size of those images?
Well, 24 feet long by 14 feet tall. They're printed at 100 DPI on vinyl. Wow. And some of those were half a frame from a D3. So like 20 megapixel frame, you know, probably about 12 megapixels when you're done. About that's the area we were using. And it's about viewing distance and, you know, pixels, and everyone gets all excited because you have, you know, a gazillion megapixels. Now, honestly, right now I'm using an 850, which is 45 megapixels, but I'm using that camera as my main camera because I tend to switch between full frame to crop sensor to 2 times the sensor depending on what I'm shooting on the fly. I have a setup to one of the buttons on the front of the camera where I'm shooting hockey with a 70 to 200 millimeter lens. I can change it from 200 millimeters to effectively a 400 millimeter lens by just changing the crop factor, and I'm still getting a 12 megapixel file. So when I'm editing, I'm not like slamming my hard drives, you know, beyond belief, and I'm still getting a usable image with enough resolution that we can print it large if we need to.
And that's where, to me, this 1DX Mark III really, like you say, if you're an action shooter,
right,
16 frames a second through the viewfinder, 20 frames a second through live view, 1,000 shot buffer, which to me is, you know, somewhat of overkill.
I want to see somebody try to get 1,000 shots in the buffer.
Yeah, just show me that one live. Come on. But it's got some things in it that I think for a sports shooter that needs to turn around for a service really quickly. First of all, 10-bit HDR, HEIF format, I think is huge. I think that's actually the feature pick for me.
Right. Especially
for people that need
turnaround.
You know, quick turnaround, but still editing, because you got 10-bit files with that. You've got more dynamic range than a JPEG, and you can push it. And then the fact that they're all cross type, 100, well, not all, but 155 cross type, and they're not line sensors. They change the way that the cross point sensors work so that it's a pixel array that goes deeper to give you better focusing when you have low contrast. I think there's a lot in this body for a pro that will make a lot of people go with that body.
What about concert photography? I would imagine it would work amazingly.
I'd love to shoot with this body concert. Again, for me, I don't know about Alan. It'd be interesting to hear. For me, when I'm in a photo pit, and I've shot with large bodies before, it actually bothers me because they're hanging on your hips. Like I shoot with 2 on a double rapid strap, and they're swinging around, and you're picking them up constantly. You're not just holding them. I like the light, smaller body. I don't even use a battery grip on my 5D4.
I couldn't do it with the big body like that. Not in those conditions myself.
Yeah, I 2 big bodies, both with motor grips. I have no problem with it, but I'm a big guy. I'm 6'3", and you know, I used to weigh 300 pounds at my heaviest, and you know, so 2 big cameras felt comfortable, and I've just been really comfortable with that. Now I will say this: when I went from the D4 with the really right stuff, L bracket on it, and a big motor grip and a 70 to 200 and all that, and then I picked up the 750, which weighed about a third of the weight. I was like, whoa, my wrists, everything felt better about it. And I recently switched to the Black Rabbit double strap because I was tired of having a camera hang around my neck on a thin strap. It started bothering my neck. I'm 51 now, man. That stuff starts to, you know,
it takes its toll eventually, right?
Yeah, it's like, oh man, I'm not in my 20s anymore. It's just like that was a real wake up last. Like,
you're so young. I'm 59.
Gosh,
I'm curious. Well, I don't know what you shoot.
You're oldish.
Michael and Ant, what do you shoot?
Most of the time I use my 6D. My 6D.
Okay, so you're a Canon shooter then.
Canon.
Michael?
5D or Canon, and also A7R3.
Is there anything you guys in this body, like Alan as a Nikon shooter, is there anything in this body that made you go, I wish I had that on Nikon?
On Nikon. Yeah, I can't.
No, there's nothing that came out of any of the new cameras announced, because Nikon also just came with the 780, which is their upgrade to the 750. They've got the Z6 and 7 and the new, Z50. None of those bodies that came out make me want to go, oh my God, I have to have this right now. I thought all the technology coming out is really cool and all that stuff, but I tend to be one of those guys that until the camera does something that I want to do and can't do with what I have, I just kind of watch the technology and go, yeah, that'll be kind of nice, and we'll see where it goes. And that's how I feel right now with all the cameras coming out. It's like, wow, my cameras do exactly what I need them to do at this point. Right. So I'm not looking with an eye to what do I want. I'm looking at it with an eye to like, oh, okay, that's kind of cool technology, and I'll see where it goes, and I'll just watch it and see what people do with it.
Now, that sort of makes me think back to the question I asked Wools a couple weeks ago. Because of CES, if you walked up to a vendor, whether it's Nikon or Canon or Sony, and just gave them what your perfect camera would be, how would you describe it, Alan? What would your perfect camera be from a body standpoint? Because we know what we like, we know what we don't like. So now it's like, how do I put that into a body and put it into research and development so they can make this thing for me? If money were no object, what would you tell them? Hey, I need this, this, and this, and get rid of that.
Well, for me, the most interesting thing about the Canon one was that buffer size. You tell me I can take 1,000 shots without ever having a hiccup or stop, or I can, I'd love to see that, everywhere. Memory's a lot cheaper, so, slam as much memory as you can into the camera. Now, the Nikons the cameras I'll use XQD cards, which when those things came out, it was like, oh my God. I remember sitting, when I got my D4, it was one of the first ones in the country, and it was I was sitting there with a guy from Nikon. We're at Photoshop World. I just got it in my hand. We're about to go and teach a class. Literally, like, I got the camera at 9 o'clock in the morning. We were teaching at noon, and I sat there and tried to figure out all the controls in a second. But I held down the shutter release, and it shot 90 frames before the thing, and it was like this was unbelievable. I'd never seen anything quite like it in my life. I can shoot 90 frames without having to worry about the buffer, which is nuts, because shooting 90 frames in a row of anything is an absolute waste of time.
Right.
Memory, it's the definition of spray and pray, but
you still have that capability.
That you never have to worry about a buffer is an unbelievable thing, and everyone should have it. That's the first thing.
And
the second one,
it doesn't overheat or anything like that?
It doesn't overheat. It didn't do, it was like, and not only that, the card writing is so fast that you take your finger off the button, and 3 seconds later, you've got a buffer space for another 50, 60 shots. It clears out instantly. You never have to worry about it. Now, it's a 12 megapixel file on a D4, whatever it is, and it's a fast card and it's fast memory. So if I'm putting together a wish list, I want to make sure that I can shoot. And it doesn't matter what it is. If I suddenly see, a Jaguar flying across the plains, or I shoot a Comic-Con, suddenly we got a famous person, doing something really stupid, I can just hold down that button and capture
and get it
without having to worry about the buffer filling up. Mm-hmm. The other one is that I definitely want 2 card slots that are identical and as fast as each other. Most of the cards now, it's like, oh, you get one of these and one of those, or one, I know the Nikon switched it out in the D5 to give you 2 XQDs if you wanted, which is great. But I find that they, going back down to the SD cards, it's one of the reasons I'm not that interested in the 780 right now as a camera, is because I don't really want 2 SD card slots anymore. Mm-hmm. I want something faster. I don't want them both to be.
I thought I was the only one like that. It always bothers me when I get a CF card and an SD card, because I shoot mirrored.
Right.
So I'm only shooting at the speed of the slowest card.
Yeah.
No matter what I do.
Oh, man. I don't shoot mirrored for concerts or sports, but I do shoot mirrored when I'm shooting events, and mainly because I have to hand off a card of JPEGs to a runner, and they don't want the raw files, but I want the raw files in case something goes horribly wrong and I need to recover something later. So when I do that, I definitely want 2 card slots, and I want them both to be the same, and I want them both to be super fast with no buffer, because we're talking about the mythical camera that I want.
Of course.
And then I want them to come up with really true silent shooting, even on the mirrorless side. Now, I had a Nikon Z6 for a month. They sent one to me to play with. I really loved it. I thought it was ergonomically great.
I
all the
played with that
controls
one
were-
myself.
It was in the 7.6 the same body. It was great, but even then the silent shooting wasn't perfect because it had banding issues, and I think they've improved a lot of it. But it was like, if I want silent shooting, I want it to be truly silent shooting that's going to be exactly the same as regular shooting.
Mm-hmm. I don't think the banding is strictly on Nikon right now either. It seems like I've heard the same thing about the Sony line too.
And somebody just posted, Tyler Stallman just posted about banding on the EOS R.
Right.
It's part of how
technology right now.
So if we're talking about a mythical beast, then you can those are kind of the things that I want. The frame rates are good. I don't need anything higher than 10 or 12. I know sports guys want a little higher, but right. My eyes aren't that good anymore. It's like, if I'm shooting hockey or something and it needs more than 15 or 20, frames in a row like that, I've missed it. So there's at that point I'm just hoping the camera catches something I don't.
Right.
And the reality is that for a while it was all about megapixels. Then it kind of changed to ISO, and now it's coming back a little bit between the two, just because of the situations I'm in. I like having 45 megapixels to play with. I thought I would hate it. I actually like it.
Yeah, it's nice.
You're saying from a freedom of recovery, that kind of thing? Is that
you show up to a concert, and it's happened to Steve and I, numerous times. You show up, you've got all your gear, you're supposed to be, 3 songs in the pit, everything is set up, and suddenly the promoter, the artist, someone decides, no, forget it. You're all going to be at the soundboard or behind the soundboard or up on the concourse level or in the parking lot shooting through a door, in the stages. And you're like,
just shoot from your car. Yeah.
Right. I live 15 miles from the venue. I can shoot from my backyard and sometimes be closer. So you're like, oh, I've got my 70-200 and I carry a 300 f4 because I have it and it's small and I can put it in my bag.
Right.
But you're like, oh man, I'm now a mile away from the stage. I like having the extra megapixels to play with. I don't need them when I'm shooting up close, but I really appreciate having that crop factor, especially the 2x crop factor. And then suddenly my 300 f4 becomes a 600 f4 effectively on the middle part. Now I don't have to crop. I can crop later, but that's just a waste of time. I'd rather crop in the camera, save a smaller file. I know I'm not having the extra space. So because of how that has changed over the years I've been shooting concerts, we went from 80% of the time in the photo pit, 20% of the time at the soundboard. It now seems to be about 80% of the time at the soundboard and about 20% of the time in the pit.
Oh, wow.
And it's really done a big shift over the years. So I don't mind shooting at the soundboard, but I want to have the gear for it.
Right.
And I don't own a 400 2.8. I mean, if anyone wants to send me a 400 2.8, I'll gladly take it. But
no doubt.
That's a $17,000 lens.
Right.
Concert photography is not exactly the money-making professional part of what we do. So being able to drop $17,000 on a lens, you have to really want it. So once in a while, I'll rent one, or Nikon will loan me one, or I'll use one of a friend, something like that. But most of the time, I'm shooting like a normal person,
right?
With not the highest end camera and not the highest end lens. So I'm trying really hard to comprehend. That's so I use the tools that I need for the job.
Exactly.
And I've shot with that 400 2.8 because I used my Canon CPS membership to get a loaner without realizing. It was smashing pumpkins, and it was that lens is amazing. It's phenomenal to shoot with. And then you go to ship it back, and I didn't realize you have to pay for shipping. And based on when the show was and when I got it, I had to ship it 2-day shipping.
Oh,
and it cost me $350 to send it back.
Oh gosh.
Yeah, not good. But it's interesting, Alan, that you're mentioning the speed that you get and the cards and the megapixels, because this one of my problems with the fast cards and the way they're getting this buffer with those CF Express cards is those cards are expensive.
Yeah, they're not cheap. I believe they
give you one with this camera,
body, right?
This camera comes with a 64 gig card and a reader.
Right, just to get you started.
Yeah.
Because it's expensive.
They're
you know what? Nikon sent with the original D4 when they switched over to the XQD cards as the first pro camera with an XQD card. It came with an XQD card and a reader from Sony.
Okay, good.
And I remember that because I added a second card and a second reader because I'm a paranoid person, and I didn't want. I like having a camera without a card reader seems to be one of those things. It drives me nuts. People, total tangent off the minute here, but people always go to me. They buy like a $5,000 camera and then they go looking for the cheapest memory card they can find.
Of course.
No.
That's like, I'm like, oh my God, you guys are like, it's like.
Taking
do you understand what you're doing? You're
high-end
taking
vehicle and putting crap gasoline in it.
Exactly.
It's like people who own expensive lenses and
Right.
put a $40 filter on the front.
Right.
So I have a story about a very expensive card. I actually shot a project, and I actually put it in my pocket. I washed it. And it's but it was actually one of the ones that actually is harder case.
Right.
And it's almost like titanium. And I was able to pull everything out. And it still works perfectly to this day.
Fortunately.
Yeah, but I actually replaced it for sure if I washed it. But I mean, it worked. But that's between expensive and inexpensive. You get, you're able
Right.
to.
Would you ever
switched
buy
to
this body, Ant?
Would I ever buy that body? Oh, yeah, I would. I don't need it. It would be total overkill, but yeah, I would. I like the shiny. Come on, who doesn't?
Yeah, that's true.
Right objects.
It has backlit buttons.
I'm not really sold on that. I know a lot of people are.
Oh, dude,
I'd kill for that.
those backlit buttons are awesome.
Well,
I have
especially
backlit
you
buttons
guys
on my
with concerts.
It makes sense for someone like y'all that are always shooting in the dark and with weird light flying around. It makes total sense, but it didn't really affect me when they announced that.
Yeah, I can see that. I'd kill for
I remember seeing a lot of comments and people just sort of throwing up the praise hands and stuff when they when they saw that.
The worst thing is having one camera that has them and one camera that doesn't, because you'll go to the one that doesn't and you'll keep trying to turn it on.
Yeah.
And nothing happens. And you're like, where
doesn't work.
why are it's not working. What's wrong with, you start, wait, that doesn't have it. It's too old.
Right.
That is so funny.
Huh.
Now, I want to move into one more thing with the body and hardware, and that is, speaking of Nikon, is they also had their 70-200 Z mount lens announced, and this was about I believe it's $2,600 for this lens, but this was a big announcement for Nikon, just putting more investment on the mirrorless side of things. I picked it up while I was at CES. Well, not picked it up. I held it, I should say, as I didn't buy it. Didn't buy it, but I held it, and it felt super duper light compared to the Canon EF 70-200 that I had in my bag at the time. And Nikon is trying to do what they can from an innovative standpoint and keeping everything nice and light, as well as give you a nice, crispy, sharp image quality. I think I had it attached to the Z6 at the time, just playing around with it. What are you guys' thoughts on that?
That is the lens I've been waiting to see them announce. That makes the Z mount worth really looking at. So the 70-200 or the original 80-200 is my favorite lens focal length use. 80+% of my images are taken with that at that focal length range for what I do. Everyone says, do you have a favorite f-stop or a favorite? That's my favorite lens. And my favorite f-stop is 2.8. So that is like, I'd rather have the 400 2.8, but I'm not going to carry that around in the street, and I'm not going to buy it. So the 70-200 and that announcement was, I thought, way overdue. I was really hoping to be the first one they came out with it, not the 24-70, but I understand that's more used by more street photographers and everyone else.
And it takes a little time on the development side too, though.
It's a short lens.
And you compared the weight though to the EF 70-200, which is kind of unfair.
Yeah.
Have you held the RF 70-200 compared to it?
The RF still felt a little bit heavy to me too. Because I saw that at the Canon booth, and that still felt a little bit heavy to me in comparison. I don't know what it is numbers-wise, but still felt a little bit heavy.
Because this one, the thing that intrigues me about what Nikon is doing with the Z series, or Z for the Canadian folks, is that it's got VR in the lens that works with the in-body stabilization, and you end up with 5 stops of VR, and that's insane.
My goodness.
The other thing that intrigued me about this lens, I love what, as a Canon shooter, there are times Nikon releases something and I'm just like, man, I really wish that I had that.
Right.
This thing focuses ridiculously close. At 200 millimeters, you can focus this thing at 1 meter, 3 feet. On a 70 to 200 at 200. That to me is cool. And then with the control ring that they have, where you can set it to do, what was it, aperture and something else, exposure or something
different
like that.
custom functions on it.
And you've got that on the EOS R with the adapter. I don't know actually if the RF lenses have that kind of control ring built into them, do they?
Yes, they do. It's usually on the end, on the very end where the focus was. You can just.
I love that idea.
Mm-hmm.
Because it keeps
takes
your
a
hands
minute
where
to
it's
get used to it, but sure.
Yeah, but it keeps when your hand is up holding the lens and you're shooting, it gives you a control with the hand that's supporting the lens, which makes a lot of difference when you're glued to the viewfinder and you're trying not to move and look at other stuff.
Yeah.
With Steve and I shoot a lot, and especially when I'm doing sports and stuff, my eye is in the viewfinder the whole time. I'm never looking around and then bringing the camera up to take a shot. I'm watching everything through the viewfinder and my other eye at the same time, so that I'm trying to figure out what's going on. And having controls right under the fingers makes a lot of sense, and it works. Like I said, last year I shot the Z6 for a month. It's actually, I think it's today's the day that, like a year ago today, I sent it back. It was like, every time my wife says it's like the worst day of when I'm sending stuff back to Nikon that I'm not keeping, like a 400. I cry a little bit, as I'm packing up the packages. I'm like, oh.
The passion is real, folks.
They were great cameras, and part of the reason I didn't actually buy a mirrorless or haven't got one yet was because this lens didn't exist for it.
Right.
And while the adapter was really good and it worked really well, and I could use my original 70 to 200 on it, waiting for this lens now to me the mirrorless has now just become a serious contender because that mount has the lens I need.
Right. Nothing beats native. All right. We're going to take a few minutes and just have a quick little break here. But then we're going to come back in and talk about one or two more little nitpicky things that I found out on these here internets. And then we'll dive a little bit more into Mr. Alan Hess.
That's good.
First and foremost, I want to say, folks, if you're listening to Focus on Photography, you know that you can also listen to me host Hands on Photography. That is another show here that I do on twit.tv. Focus on Photography. We have a good time sitting around the mics, chatting and talking about all the things wonderful in the world of photography. Hands on Photography, I like to sit down and go through some of the nitpicky things to help you be a little bit better, whether it's just taking a look at the different cameras, the different camera settings, post-processing, Photoshop, Lightroom, tips, tricks, even done a little bit of photo critiquing here a couple times. So check us out. That is twit.tv/hop. And that is Hands on Photography. We record that each and every Thursday at about 2 p.m. Pacific time, something like that. Depends on how fast I can get ready here in the studio. But yeah, that is Hands on Photography here on twit.tv. A lot of fun. If it's something that you're interested in, just trying to get a little bit of extra knowledge and how-tos and tutorials, that's the show to check out. That's twit.tv/hop. All right. So now let's go ahead and take a look at one more thing. Speaking of Photoshop, Instagram is now saying they're going to start hiding, air quotes, Photoshopped photos in your feed. And boy, that sort of pissed me off just a little bit when I read that, because who is Instagram to judge and say, hey, this is Photoshop, we don't want you to see this, blah, 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 blah. What's happening, as according to petapixel.com, is you'll scroll through your Instagram feed and you'll get a warning on a particular image that's basically saying, hey, this is not a legit picture. This has been manipulated. It allows you to click through and view the image, but I just don't like that whole X and black screen that's showing up on it. It's saying, you know what? No, we don't like this. This is Photoshopped. If you put additional contrast on an image, you're manipulating the image, right?
Mm-hmm.
If you put in additional saturation, you're manipulating the image, right? So is Instagram going to step in and say, hey, that HSL has a little bit too much red in that red channel, so we need to pull that back?
I think they were trying to, if there's like somebody doing something to like a political, kind of like that whole, and then manipulating that.
And I say all of that in jest. I know that they're trying to stop all of the false stuff from the political standpoint, but
if there's something creative,
they worded that totally wrong.
Right.
But even Facebook is not. While Facebook is checking some ads, they're not checking political ads, and Instagram is a Facebook company.
It's a Facebook company.
Yeah.
And my biggest problem is, okay, so here's the first thing that hit me. I have a good friend who's a wedding photographer. And Troy, periodically in a wedding, you'll shoot on a gloomy day, or he'll swap out a sky. He's gotten really good at swapping out the sky, but he'll swap out a sky. So imagine you give photos to a bride who then proudly, my wedding photos, right? And she posts them on Instagram, and Instagram filters those photos. Or Alan and I have a buddy, Dustin Jack, who does some composite stuff, and he just did a composite of Def Leppard and Motley Crue in a stadium. So you give that to Motley Crue. Motley Crue puts it on their account as an ad for the new tour that's coming out. And Instagram filters it because it's a composite.
Man,
this could go wrong in so many ways.
I wish I could have been sitting in the office when they said, hey, we need to figure out a way to fix these Photoshopped images. Like, I want to know who said all of this and what their particular conversation was.
Or just stop generalizing the whole process. Saying everybody's the same thing, it just doesn't make sense.
True.
I don't get it.
And doesn't Instagram have filters built in, as Reverb Mike says in the chat room? It's what's the difference?
That's actually a good point. And the ad, the picture they showed in the post, if you read the post, there's like a guy standing in the mountains, and they did the rainbow mountains, right? Okay, so if you make mountains rainbow, does that mean making mountains black and white? Is fake?
I'm want to go by through my Instagram and see if there's anything, but I don't have very much.
I actually went through my Instagram to look because every single this is gonna come as a shock to some people, but every single image on my Instagram feed except for I think one comes out of Photoshop.
Right.
Because I don't use my cell phone camera very often to take photographs of stuff, so I use my real camera, so it's a raw file, so it gets processed. So I change something because I can't post the raw file,
right?
And then Photoshop touches it, and then I crop it, and sometimes I remove stuff, and sometimes I add stuff, and once in a while I'll even add text to something once. So theoretically,
wait a minute! Stop now, Mr. Hess.
I know. Thank you.
Text does not exist just floating in the air. Now, come on, we can't have that.
I did it once because everyone else did it, and they like peer pressure, like post something.
As long as it wasn't Comic Sans, you're okay.
Yeah, it might have been. So I thought this thing was again one of those knee-jerk reactions to people trying to save people from themselves. It's like if you see a photograph and it's got a horse's head coming out of some guy's collar, it's like, okay, yeah, that was faked and it's Photoshopped. If it's done really, really well and they're trying to, like you get, and I'll stay away from political side of it. Let's say you have some actor, kissing another actor,
right?
Photoshop, but it's done really, really well,
right?
How are they going to tell anyway? They're going to have to look at the metadata, which means they're going to now start looking for edited in Photoshop or whatever it is, and then, that's every one of my images, even though,
right?
And who decides what is edited and what is not?
It sounds like quite a process, though, that they go through. It's like it goes through one screening, then another screening, and then there's a person who actually says yes or no.
I can't
imagine how many millions of images you're going to go through.
I think most of it's going to be sort of a machine learning on their side, but we'll see how well that goes.
Well, and let's talk about the changes that really matter to us. They recompress our images horribly, and they strip the metadata.
Oh, yeah.
So they're changing our images for us in ways that don't benefit us.
Nobody mentions that.
Well, on a side note, did you see the other Instagram story about the guy who uploaded the same picture like 500 times.
Right, and it kept breaking it down.
Yeah, and by the time it's done, it's literally like 2 black holes where the eyes are and like some gray skin around it. It's like, that's way worse to do to my pictures than, saying they came out of Photoshop.
I know Adobe mentioned at their last Adobe Max, they have what they call Adobe Sneaks, where they talk about different projects that they're working on that may or may not end up being an official Adobe product. And one of the sneaks was a tool that will basically say this picture has been manipulated, and this one has not been. And the discussion was, changing contrast and exposure and brightness and stuff, that doesn't necessarily mean manipulation. It was looking more at things like these pixels being stretched out. It was a lot deeper. It was using a lot of machine learning. And I'm hoping that's the line that Instagram and the Facebook folks were trying to take, but I don't know. I need more proof.
One thing I didn't see, did any of you see a way to protest it? I mean, if your image is in some way blocked, is there a way for you to protest that?
I didn't see it.
No,
didn't see that.
I didn't see that at all. But I talking about Max. So the other thing Adobe announced at Max, they talked about in I believe it was the keynote on the first day, was that they're working out a way so that images can be certified as in not edited.
All right.
They had this. They're kind of come up with a way for press images so that they are. This is like, okay, you took a raw file and you did the contrast and you did some, but you didn't remove or add anything. You didn't you didn't composite anything, and it was kind of one of those things that came out kind of later in the talk for about 2.5 minutes. So it probably got brushed over.
Long.
Right, because it's coming out. I think it's still in the working stages, but it was really interesting to me. So one of the clients that I've had in the past and that I shoot for once in a while is the Associated Press. And I've worked for the AP, I've shot for the AP, and there's a really, really strict set of rules of what you can and cannot do to an image. And having that little Adobe thing I perked right up. Photoshop on the iPad and Illustrator on the iPad. I don't use Illustrator anyway, so Illustrator on the iPad is kind of like, and I'm like, yeah. And then suddenly it was like, oh, we can certify that your images are, this is an unmanipulated press image. I'm like, okay.
Makes your job easier.
That's going to be important because, man, editing is good. I got friends who can edit, and you look at stuff and you're like, I can't even find when you edit it. You had one on, Lisa Carney.
Right.
So I've known Lisa, for years, and I've seen some of the work she's done, and you look at that and you're like, I can't figure out what she did.
She's a daggum magician, man.
Because you look at the picture and you're like, that looks exactly like it should look. And, so there's people out there who can manipulate anything. Now,
Aaron Nace.
The softer side of stuff has to be able to go, okay, dude, that's an amazing image. But look, this background was stretched. Liquify was used here. Frequency separation was used on the skin here. The bath soap you're using is not going to give you the best complexion. That photo, that image has been edited in this way and this way. And Adobe has that capability because look, and they're tracking everything you're doing.
Yep.
They know what's going into the image because you can go back and undo the steps, redo the steps, save it as a thing. If that freaks you out,
we've been training their AI for them.
Oh,
essentially.
Yeah, they love every picture we upload to Adobe Cloud Services because they get to look at it and we're kindly meta tagging every single thing we do to it. So, yeah, their Sensei AI server is, probably going to be the new, Arnold Schwarzenegger, and it's going to have to come and blow it up soon.
I think that's a good thing, though. It's again because of the way it can help make creative tasks easier for us. I was, with all of this AI stuff years ago started coming up in the world of creativity, I was totally against it. I was like, there's no computer that's going to see this scene the way I see it.
Right.
Not like Aunt Pruitt sees it, but over time they just kept putting all these extra tools in that helped bring my vision out with just a couple clicks.
Right.
And it's all because of what we as other photographers have been doing in their apps. It says, we like to do this much on the curves. We like to do this much with frequency separation and so on and so forth. So yeah, I get it now, but boy, at first I was like, nope, no part of it.
But it's going through everything we're doing, and people don't realize it, but it also starts with the cameras. So you talk about the high-end Nikons and the high-end Canons and the high-end Sonys and the algorithms that they use on the metering modes, because they're comparing the scene that they're seeing and the light and dark values coming into the camera to a database of other things that they've come up with that says, oh, that looks like you're photographing some static object against a bright white sky.
And it does it in milliseconds.
It does it, and it's adjusting it continuously. So I mean, you know, the iPhone is amazing. You can point it at something and take a picture, and 80% of the time it's totally usable and fine. And it's like, I never said anything. I didn't even pick a mode or what I'm focusing on, or it's just, it does it because that technology is starting at the camera level and it's working all the way through to the software side of it.
And depending on the camera, those engineers are making different choices. You know, you brought up the iPhone. If you compare an iPhone photo, those engineers made choices that they don't want to do too much to the image and want to stay, you know, what is arguably more real on colors, although to me they're somewhat muted.
Yeah, they're a little flat.
Then you go to a Samsung,
right,
and the colors are oversaturated and the picture is oversharpened, but to some people that's pleasing to their eye.
Yeah, that's what they want. My goodness, this stuff is just it fascinates me just how fast it happens, and just the where we are as far as the different iterations year over year, because it's just getting better and better, and all you do is, like Mr. Hess said, you just tap the button on your phone and bam, that picture is done. All right. Before we get out of here, I want to pick the brain of Mr. Hess a little bit. You know, our esteemed guest. At CES last week, you know, I said I visited the Canon booth, and Canon had this beautiful stage set up with all of their different cameras out front, and it allowed you to just shoot and take photographs of, it was like 5 or 6 models and a couple other acrobats and so forth. And it was awesome. But I'm shooting those models and I'm thinking, man, this is so hard. I don't know how concert people do it. Because you're in this so-called controlled environment, but at the same time, the lighting was changing 50,000 times a second. They would move a different pose, and that's what they should do. But there were times where I would struggle just to try to find the proper lighting, just to try to find the proper angle. And I'm looking at Mr. Hess and looking at Mr. Brazill and some of the shots that they shared, and I'm thinking, what is going into your research or pre-planning when you know you have a concert coming up, you know?
Well, there's a couple of things you got to know right off the bat. The first thing is that I have taken a multitude of really, really bad photos.
Okay.
I have taken bad photos at every single show I've ever shot. I've never gone and shot something and had every single frame be like, oh, yeah, that's perfect.
Yeah, and that's fair.
Portfolio.
But you'll never see them.
Right.
So I don't always delete them, because sometimes I'm looking at them like, oh, how did I screw that one up so badly?
Gotcha.
I'll try to figure it out. But I don't post a huge amount of stuff all the time, because it tends to dilute what people see. If you post 10 great photos and then you post another 10 pretty good photos, and then you post another 10 pretty good, you've now posted 30 photos, and people are going to average all the ones they see together, and they'll come up with like, oh yeah, okay, they're pretty good. And if they're really similar, then their brain starts getting bored, and they're suddenly bored with a shot that should be really great. So the first thing you got to understand is that I have shot a ton of crap that you will never see. Some of them make it to a book once in a while, but that's really rare.
I share my crap ones every now and then, just so people know that photographers are human, especially people that are just getting started. People will get sort of down in the dumps on themselves, thinking, man, I wish I was shooting like this photographer or shooting like that photographer.
But you only see the best we ever shoot. You're not sitting over my shoulder when I'm going through. I think Steve and I met at Mayhem Festival years ago. I think that was the first time we shared it. Was one of, when I shot Mayhem Festival for 10 years, 10 or 12 bands a day in the San Bernardino sun for 8 hours. So there's probably
in August.
2,000. Yeah, in August, July and August. Yeah, 2,000 images a day more for 10 years. I've probably posted 30.
Yeah.
So there's a huge slew of stuff that, that there's really great shots in there. And once in a while I go back through and post them up. But the idea is that you don't see them. So it's not that we screw it up. It's that, or don't screw it up. It's that you don't see the screw ups.
Right.
So that's the first thing people have to understand is, as a professional photographer, my job is to show you my best work, not my worst work. As
and social media for people like us is marketing in a way. So I always tell people, only show people the photos that show you the way you want to be seen. So, and that's great. You're only showing pictures, like Alan said. If you post 10 shots, most people are going to look at the worst shot in that 10. And that's the type of photographer that you are. So only post the shots that show your skill level where you want to be. It doesn't mean you didn't shoot other ones. And that's why don't compare yourself to other people's highlight reel. Everybody's got bad shots. And when I do presentations, I show mistakes. I show frames where I had this perfect framing and the guitarist decided to jump out. And so in the frame, it's mid-thigh and his legs and feet, and he's out of the frame at the top.
So
which actually is kind of cool, but still.
So I have a question for the both of you. What does make a great image? I mean,
from a concert
standpoint or even a feeling standpoint. I mean, what is a good image?
My goal when I started out, and it's still my goal now, is that I wanted people to look at a shot and feel like they were there. Like, oh wow, that was, even if they weren't there, I was like, oh, that looks like it was a fantastic moment. That looked like a great guitar solo. That has emotion in it. So I'm always looking for a shot that to me would just stand out as, I don't get to stand behind you and go, okay, so they were playing this really cool song and then the guy did a drum solo and then this happened, because I'm not there. You just get to see that shot, and it needs to take someone back to that show, that moment, or man, I wish I would have been there. My best comment would have been like, oh.
For me, it's pretty much the same. To me, it's all about the moment. And that moment can be summed up in one of three ways. Either they were at the show and they see the shot and it immediately takes them mentally back to the show. They weren't at the show and it makes them feel like, oh, I know what it would have been like to be there. Or something that an average audience member is curious about but doesn't see, and that's where the onstage stuff comes. Right. Where you get the audience or you get an angle on them that an audience member normally will never see. But it's all about the moment.
See, and that onstage stuff, people always like, oh my God, you get to go hang out like backstage. It's like, dude, A, it's boring as hell. And B, the whole show is meant to be seen from the audience. So one shot or two shots, showing the crowd or behind the band is great, but that's really not the view. Everyone wants to see it, but you only want to see it once. Right. Then you're like, the whole show is meant to be seen from the front. So capturing it from the front is what I really, strive to get and strive to do.
And arguably 80% of any show is the audience.
Yeah.
Wow.
I'm really bad at turning around and photographing the audience. I am. It's one of my things that I'm working on, but my brain works as a fan. I started off as a music fan, which is why I did this in the first place. I mean, it was way back when, and the little band that I used to go and watch allowed cameras. So I took my camera, and that was, where it started. But I never turned around and photographed the people behind me because they didn't have my attention. It was the people on the stage that had my attention.
So now I'm trying energy too, man. Those fans have energy in concert.
I still have that image of yours, Steve, where the fan in the middle of the the audience. It's really beautiful.
I mean, we've all been at shows where the band feels flat, and a lot of times that's because the audience is flat. They feed off the audience, and if it's you don't get as many. I mean, let's be honest. I'm like Alan. I'm just a fan, right? I'm looking through my viewfinder framing constantly, and I'm one of those guys who sometimes I forget to listen to the songs, but when I do, it's just I'm lucky. I get to choose what I want to shoot, and I shoot bands I like. But there is still something about now and then getting that shot of an audience member, freaking out because they're watching their idol. And that's a special thing. Right. That's part of the story. And I still look at music photography, and this is I learned so much from this guy, from Alan Hess. I mean, he literally wrote the book on concert photography. And the first time I met him, I stood in a photo pit, and I stood on the far side, and I watched what he did. And I analyzed where he walked, and I analyzed how often his camera was at his eye. And to me, still, there's this photojournalism background to live music photography, even though a lot of people do Photoshop and don't follow those journalistic ethics rules. There's a photojournalism thing of telling the story, and all of it's the story.
Right.
Now, what are your tips far as, like, do you have any type of pre-planning when you know you have, say, a Snoop Dogg gig coming up? Do you meet with the production company that's putting the show together that says, hey, we're going to be doing, the stage is going to be this high, it's going to be this wide, it's going to be this depth, the lights are going to be here, the lights are going to be there? Do you get to get involved in any of that stuff? And he's laughing at me.
I doubt it.
Oh, God, no.
You're just throwing in the pit.
You don't. So I describe myself a lot of times when people ask about this. I am literally one of the laziest photographers out there because I have control over nothing.
Yeah.
I don't get to. I feel for wedding photographers, but even they have a little bit. They compose people. So as a concert photographer, Steve and I know this. We don't get to decide where the subject stands. We don't get to decide where the light is. We don't get to decide where we shoot from. We don't get to decide how long we shoot. We don't get to decide any of that stuff.
They literally just tell you to
sometimes
be there.
Not even
on
what
time.
we get to post.
Yeah, dude. I'm shooting a show tonight. I'm driving up to Anaheim. I'm shooting a show at the House of Blues in Anaheim tonight. It's a band I've shot before a couple of times. It's a big metal allegiance, and so they have the core guys and guests all night. I had, at this point, so the show's in a couple hours. I have no idea where I'm going to be shooting from because I know that the photo pit is going to be full, so they're going to cycle us in and out depending on how many people are there. I have no idea who's going to be playing when or what songs people are going to be on. I know who's performing. I just have no idea when they're performing. Man. I don't know any of this stuff. So my bag is packed like it is always packed. I got 2 camera bodies. I got 4 lenses.
Right.
I take a 70 to 200, a 24 to 70. I have a 20 to 35, and I have a 16 mil fisheye.
Wow. Okay, so you have
they all fit in one bag.
Covers the gamut.
That covers me complete. And if I know that I'm going to shoot from the back of the room, I'll have an extra bag with that little 300 f4 in it, and I'm good to go from 300 to 16 mil. I have a bunch of memory cards, including a couple of 120 gig XQD cards for the 850. I have a credential waiting for me.
So, and in answer to your question, for me, because we don't get control, if I'm shooting, like when I shot Snoop Dogg, I'd never seen him live. So Google is your friend and YouTube is your friend.
Yep.
And I look at live photos because here's one of the key things for me is, take a situation where you have a singer who never switches hands with the mic.
All right.
So if that mic is always in their right hand,
you need to be on the other side. With
then you want to make sure you're on the side where their face is open. Or sometimes you'll have guitarists like a Joe Walsh or somebody who pull back from the mic all the time to hit high notes, and they always turn a certain way. Sometimes they turn the guitar this way and the head that way. Knowing those type of things just increases your chances. If you have access to production people, like when I shot Self-Help Festival, I had all access. I'm able to at least say, I know confetti is going off. Can you at least tell me what song? Right. Gosh. So that you at least know, okay, I know I want my 16 to 35 in my hand at the start, or do you know when it's going off? I have my 16 to 35 in my hand at the start of the song because confetti is going to shoot. But normally it's, you go in there, and that's the beauty of it is suddenly there's the singer's on that side of the stage. You've got the 70 to 200 up shooting the drummer, and 30 seconds later, the singer is in your face, and it's, where's the body with the 16?
The reason I have 2 camera bodies is there's a simple photography rule that whatever lens you have on your camera is the wrong one.
Oh, okay.
It doesn't matter.
That's so true.
It doesn't matter which one you're using. When I shot film, I had one body. So you get back then it was 80 to 200, and I'm shooting the guy across the stage, and he runs at me, and I'm like, oh crap! Now I got to take the lens off and hold it under my arm, and take the other lens and put it on the body, and I put it up, and then at that point he's over in the back corner again. crap, take that one off, and he's running towards you. So it doesn't matter which lens is on your body; it's probably
still the wrong one.
And that's the beauty of it. Right?
What is your go-to lenses?
70 to 200, 24 to 70. That's I am.
For me, it's a trilogy. It's one body always has either my 16 to 35 or my 15 fish. The other body rotates between the 24 to 70 and the 70 to 200. We get 3 songs, so usually I'll shoot one song with each on that body, 70, 200, 24 to 70, and the third song is whichever one I felt worked the best for that show. And the wide angle is always on this lens for when somebody gets right in your face. It's just ready to go.
Nice. If it were up to me, I would go 24-70 and 70 to 200. Both of those lenses.
I like the wide angle though. I love the.
See that's why. And that's the best part about this is that we can shoot a show, and we've done it. We were at Mayhem Festival, and it's no longer in existence, but Mayhem Festival one year had 70 credentialed photographers in the photo pit. 70.
Yeah.
Every single one of them was shooting the same band on stage, and every single one of those photographers came up with a different shot. Because where we're standing, what we're looking at, what we're focusing on, what lens we're using, landscape or portrait mode, what we want to capture is different from everyone else. So we're standing in the same spot, we're shooting the same band, we're literally using settings that are really similar to each other, but what we capture is different every time.
And actually, that's really key to me, because I hear people say, move to where other photographers aren't. You don't want everybody to have the same shot. And I'm a firm believer that if Ant was standing right next to me, that particular show Alan mentioned had corn at it. It's the only photo pit where I've actually felt in danger because it was so full.
Crazy.
And you couldn't walk, you couldn't move for 3 songs,
and
no one got the same shots because I happened to choose to squat down and frame it with a light behind him to get a halo, or to just lean or something like that, and somebody else would be 6'3",
right,
and take a different angle just because they're taller,
right. And all of that makes perfect sense, and it just shows that it takes a lot of practice, a lot of experience to figure out that type of mindset of, okay, I can get this because I'm standing here, versus the other person is getting something totally on the other end of the spectrum.
Right.
Well, and that's part of. I mean, you hear a lot of photographers trying to hold their secrets. Oh no, this is my secret sauce. There's no. Well, that's. I mean, I came up with that a long time ago. There was no one out there sharing anything about concept photography when I started. But I started back with film, back in the 80s kind of thing. And when I had finally gotten around to writing a couple of books, and my editor said, "What do you want to write about now that you've done the ones we want you to write?" I wanted to do a concert book because there wasn't one.
Right.
That's not true. There were 2, but one of them was still talking about using black and white film, and we were in the digital age already. And the other one was so outdated it didn't matter. But my thing was, it doesn't matter. I'm not giving up anything that someone couldn't learn if they just tried, because I did. I just wasted a lot of money doing it back in the day. Well, film actually cost me. You go shoot a show, you shoot 3 or 4 rolls of film. That's $20 a roll, and then $20 to get it developed, and then you end up with 1 print because everything else is out of focus, too dark, and you have no instant feedback. So you shoot an entire roll thinking you have your exposure right, and you get it back, and everything's out, or you get it back, and everything is too dark. And this is back where you're 1 hour developing, so you're holding up the print going, well, okay, now I'm screwed. I can't do anything with that, and the whole roll's gone. But everyone was like, oh, well, now people are going to understand how to do it. And I'm like, it doesn't matter.
Right.
It literally doesn't matter, because I'm standing next to someone, I'm working for someone, they're working for someone else.
Right.
It's not like if Steve learns how I photograph stuff, he's going to come and go, well,
I'm stealing your f-stop.
I'm going to steal your job. Yeah, I'm going to steal your job. People are like, oh, you're going to steal my job. That's not how it works. I mean, I've literally had someone try to take my job at the arena I work for now, and they were like, no, we're really happy with his work. And for me, having other people there and younger kids coming up and people shooting with a different mindset makes me just want to get better.
Yeah.
I don't look at them and go, damn it, I can't stand these young whippersnappers. It's like, take the flash off the camera and please stop wearing the big flowery hats.
Or please stop using live view in the pit. That's just.
Oh my God, yeah.
I understand you have mirrorless, but you have this wonderful electronic viewfinder. Put the thing at your eye, please.
Please and thank you.
Also, too, actually, when you're set on a shot, keep on shooting versus keep on taking a shot and looking at it, taking a shot and looking at it. You see a lot of photographers.
I don't look at what I shoot. I mean, that's not true. I don't look at what I shoot very often. Right. Sometimes if you see me in the photo pit looking at a shot down, because I just think I've got the shot and I'm done.
Yeah.
If I see something,
and you're missing the shots. You're missing the shots that are happening.
Yeah, but I think there's a shot I got of the drummer from Mana. He stood up on his drum stool and he leapt in the air, and I missed it completely. I saw him do it and I missed it.
Yeah.
And so I spent the rest of the show
trying to look for that shot,
waiting for him to do, and he did it again, and I got it, and I looked down and I realized I had gotten the frame. I got the whole sequence. I was done.
Yeah, you dropped the mic then, right?
I literally I can walk out of this thing right now, man. I know I got a whole nother song to go, but I'm literally like, that's the shot. I'm so when that'll do it. But that's part of that, like, what do you want to capture? I'd already got pictures of everyone. I knew that I was good in the first song with the standard stuff I need. And that's how I work. So Steve was saying he switches that last song onto which lens. For me, it's the first song is to make sure I get the standard shots that I have to have. Guitar player with a guitar, singer singing, drummer, whatever it is, I got the standard shots. That's all done. The next two songs to kind of, all right, let's look for some different angles. Let's look to see, how can I make this look a little different? Is something happening that's more interesting? Well, it doesn't seem like a long time. It's about 15 minutes total.
So what is a standard shot?
For me, a standard shot is a singer with a microphone in front of them, or a guitar player, pulling out a solo, something like that.
Well, for me, a standard shot is I want a shot of every band member where I want a flattering shot of every band member.
Yeah.
So hopefully I can see eyes of some sort, or at least one eye and part of the mouth. I hate it when the whole mouth is covered for me.
Right.
I mean, there's exceptions to every rule, but generally. And then I always try and get a wide shot of all band members in one shot.
Yeah.
And my rule is, I don't know if anybody else does this. I love photographing drummers. And that's sometimes based on, like, we just lost Neil Peart, and he's a good example of a drum set where you can't see him, right?
Yep.
There's quite often one angle where you can get the drummer clean and a good shot of their full face and not cut off at the neck, but maybe a little bit of shoulder in there.
Yeah.
And my first position in a pit almost always is where I can get a good shot of the drummer. Because if I can get that to start, I can move around all night long.
And build from that. Gotcha.
And build from that. And I may never be able to get in that spot again once people start moving.
Right. Of course.
Yeah, that's kind of the thing. And Rush was one of those shows we shot a couple of years ago, and I just went through them because of Neil passing away. And the fact that my brother is a massive Rush fan, so he's in mourning still. But we I couldn't get the entire band in a single frame without using my 16mm fisheye, because it was a huge stage and they were so spread apart. Alex Lifeson was all the way on one side, Geddy Lee was all the way on the other side, and they kind of stayed in their little positions. And I was like, oh man, this is
and you can't not come together.
No, you can't. Yeah, you stand in the middle like, could you guys go and talk to each other for a minute? I was like, yeah. It was just one of those things that got to be really frustrating. But once I had that with a fisheye shot, I just managed to get the individual shots, and then for what we did in the building, we just put up one of Geddy Lee because it just turned out to be the best one for the wall that it was going up on. Right. You were talking about prepping. The other thing that I think is really important when it comes back to prepping for a show, and this is the thing that the younger newcomers tend to not do right now as much as I think they should, is know their camera gear.
Yeah, as simple as that sounds, yet people don't quite get it.
Yeah, because you're doing it in the dark. So even with lighted buttons and screens and things like that, you got to change settings in the dark. But I'm a very lazy photographer, as I said, so I have no control of everything I'm doing. So for me, it's a really simple process, and that hint of how you want to start. ISO 1600, 2.8, 1/250th of a shutter speed.
Period. Right.
Exactly where I start. Exactly.
That is literally the starting point, because it turns out that if you go into Lightroom and you take a catalog of, 500,000 images from concerts over the years I shot at the venue, and you look at the metadata, 70% of the pictures fall into that range.
Yep.
And that's just a great place to start. And once you're in that spot, it becomes really simple. Too dark? Great. Lower the shutter speed until people start to blur, then raise the ISO. Start over. Too light? Increase the shutter speed. Yep. It's like, you can work with that. So I know how to do those things without ever taking the camera down from my eye.
Yeah. That's awesome.
I can hold my camera up, I can change the ISO, I can change the shutter speed, and I can change the aperture without ever having to look at the camera at all.
I used to have calluses on my thumbs from moving dials so often in the middle of a shoot, because I got to the point where I could feel, without looking at the actual settings, I could just feel where the buttons were and move things. And
it's what else?
Difference.
Alan's right. It's amazingly freeing from a creative point of view. If you're not thinking about the tech side, if you can make those changes brainless,
right,
then as you're making the changes, you can still compose. You can still think about artistic choices. That's where great photos come from, is the fact that you didn't have to even think about it. It just was second nature to get the setting that you needed and get the shot.
Right. Yeah. All right.
Freeing.
Well, gentlemen, someone in the chat room just said, I believe it was Izzy, they said, can this go on for another hour?
This is a really
Unfortunately, we cannot.
And there's so many other questions. Just kind of we could even recite your book, maybe.
Yeah, Mr. Hess, this book that you're mentioning, where do we find this book?
Amazon? No,
Amazon.
I have. It is on Amazon. Actually, I have I've written a couple of books over the years. I think we're at 16 or something. I was going to say,
it wasn't a couple, sir. It was
seven. Like Rick Salmon.
Yeah, but some of them are like on the iPad 1, which is a little bit outdated and honestly not really worth it. But the concert one is called All Access: Your Backstage Past a Concert Photography.
Oh, nice.
And that one is, when I wrote it, I specifically didn't want to make it gear specific, so that it was like, this is just going to be good for now. The concepts behind it are good. They're still good. It's really a concept book. Yes, on
it's
the
the
Nikon
definitive
shoot,
book on live music photography, hands down.
But yeah,
so it's the Bible.
We will definitely.
And I'm really proud of that one. It's probably good. For people starting out, I wrote one last year that came out. It's called which one is that? That's called the Make Great Photos, and it's a little blue one. That's a basic photography book that covered everything. So I kind of run the gamut between those two. If you're just starting out, or someone that's starting out, Make Great Photos will help. But if you're a concert guy, or you want to just understand what it takes to shoot low light event stuff, then All Access is probably the way to go.
And if you're in the chat room, Retcon5 just posted a link to Alan's.
Oh, nice.
Okay. Beautiful. Retcon.
I'm not in the chat room, because that would be multitasking.
We don't want to interfere with laziness.
We will definitely link to your books in our show notes for this week's episode. So yeah, that's good stuff.
What people. The one last thing I just want to say, people make it more complicated than it really is. Photography really only has 3 settings. You can only change your shutter speed, your ISO, or your aperture. I mean, that's like, there's nothing else. And I know you're an IT guy, and I know, Steve, you're an IT guy still, and my degree's in computer science and English. So this creativity for people who can't paint and draw. That's how I look at photography, because I can understand. There's 3 settings, man. I can handle 3 settings. Right. In our line of work, we only really get to play with 1, because you got to be wide open and you got to be shooting a high ISO. So really all I'm doing is changing shutter speed, and then I'm trying to find something that looks good. And what looks good to me might not look good to you. And that's why we don't all take the same pictures or like the same pictures.
Right.
But I'm hoping that my pictures evoke some emotion. People look at them and they go, "Oh yeah," or that reminds them of what they saw at the time. And
Yes.
and I know Steve's the same way. I mean, like I said, we've been in photo pits with 70 plus people shooting the same bands, and everyone's coming up with something different. I tend to stay a little further back into the sides and use a long lens for compression factors. I really like that. I don't like being right up close and doing the wide angle in your face stuff. I love seeing those pictures, but they make me uncomfortable when I do it, because I tend to be like that guy who wants to be in the corner of everything. I just like to watch stuff going on, and then I like to pick out things that are happening. So if you take different kinds of pictures, that's cool. That's
To
that's
each
cool.
his own.
Right.
To each his own. Now, so if people are trying to find you, Mr. Hess, where is the best place to look you up and see what you got going on? Where there's some upcoming events,
The reality is, right now, Instagram is probably the thing that I update more often, and it's just Alan Hess.
Okay.
I have AlanHessPhotography.com, and recently it turned out that it was hijacked on something, and so it was sending us. I had to deal with Google and re-index mapping and site mapping and all that kind of fun stuff, because it was sending people to wrong places and all kinds of things.
Oh, wow.
So we're working on that, and last year I had some medical issues with my leg, and some things that came up that I kept out of social media and off my website. So it hasn't been updated in a while, and the new updates that I put up I had to pull down when I had this website issue. But Alan Hess Photography is really the home
Gotcha.
for that. I probably need to talk to some of your other podcast people about my internet security and those kind of things. But
That is Security Now on twit.tv with Steve Gibson.
Steve Gibson and Leo.
I've been listening to that for a long time. I like I said, I was a computer science guy, so the whole Steve Gibson and Spin Right and all those programs and stuff, I have fond memories of doing that, and I still do tech support for people.
Nice.
So
That's
that's still a big part of my life. Yeah.
That's what's up.
And at some point, I know we spent a lot of time today talking concerts and low light stuff, but I also do a lot of things with Comic-Con and other events. So that'll come up in July again. I'm already credentialed this year as a professional, so I'm getting all my geek excitements going for that already.
Well,
and,
how about I look to link up with you after Comic-Con right back here on Focus on Photography? How about that?
Yeah, that'd be great. Yeah, we can talk about that too.
Sweet. We got him to say it on there.
Nice.
You might not have noticed this, but I'm happy to talk about photography all the time. It's hard to get me to shut up about it. So it's still a passion. It's still a geek thing. That's part of it. They always say, find a job you love and you won't work it in your life. That's absolute junk. You're going to be working much harder on stuff you love than on stuff you don't.
Amen to that.
Yeah, that's
Thank
really
you. Thank you so much, Mr. Hess, for joining us this week. This has been outstanding. Love the conversation, love the energy and the insight and the little bit of self-deprecation of, I'm a lazy photographer, dude. Really?
Yeah, I don't see it.
A lot of fun.
But it's a mindset. I mean, I look at people, and I know like Joe McNally, who goes out there with 7 million speed lights and assistants and gets everything exactly perfect, and he's got control over everything, and it's man.
Different story.
I can't do that.
No. Now, Mr. Brazill, where do we find you and everything that you got hopping up in the internet?
Mostly I'm on either Twitter or Instagram, and it's just at Steve Brazill on both of those. And then the website is stevebrazill.com. It's like Brazil, but it's got 2 L's.
But there's one more thing, Mr. Brazill. Come on. Behind the Shot.
Oh, yes.
Come on,
Behind
dude.
the Shot. So I do a podcast called Behind the Shot. It's at behindtheshot.tv. Alan's been a guest on it. It was funny because when I had Alan on, I specifically thought everybody's going to expect a concert shot.
Oh.
So instead we did a rodeo shot.
There you go. There you go.
And it's an awesome rodeo shot. And there were moments during that where he'd say what he chose to do. Like at one point he moved to another side of the arena. And it was just like, oh my, there's so much enlightening content. So yeah, behindtheshot.tv.
Word.
Sweet.
Thank you so much. We'll link to that as well in our show notes. And lastly, my man, Wools, where do we find you?
On Instagram at HeyWools, and I say Twitter as well. But as my website is michaelbwoolsey.com.
Perfect. Me, you find me on these internets with ant_Pruitt on the Twitterverse and Instagram. I try to keep it somewhat simple as well. Also, be sure to check out twit.tv on the Instagram as well as on Twitter. We're going to share a lot of behind the scenes stuff from our social media standpoint and even have a little bit of fun on, is it called TikTok? Ain't that the thing the kids are using nowadays? TikTok. And you never know what you're going to see over there. So check out TwitTalk on TikTok if you're using that platform. Lastly, again, check us out each and every week here on Focus on Photography. Every Thursday at about 9 a.m. Pacific time was when we set up the cameras for the live stream. But we'll have it hitting your podcatcher of choice later on today, same day that is. So when you go to your podcatcher of choice, search for Focus on Photography, hit subscribe, hit download, and then after you've done that, hit share, so other folks can find out more about FOP and what we're talking about here each and every week with all of our outstanding guests. And also check out Hands on Photography. So look that up, hit subscribe, download, and share as well. All right, so I'm going to get out of here. I want to say thank you again to my man, Mr. John A. and Mr. John S. for keeping us looking and sounding great here in the Last Pass studios. Thank you again to Mr. Wools. Thank you again to our guests being here this week.
This is
Folks,
awesome.
This has been a lot of fun. So until next time, get on out there, keep creating and dominating, baby. We'll catch you next week. See ya.